Outa has joined calls for the city of Johannesburg to freeze disputed property rate increases. Although the Finance MMC announced that property rates would be increased by just 2%, Outa has pointed out that this increase doesn't include valuation increases in the recent general valuation roll of 2023. Let's speak now to Julius Kleynhans, who's a social innovation executive for Outa. Julius, good evening to you. Thanks for your time. Firstly, what's the real problem here?
No, look, I think the method that the city of Johannesburg applied to conduct valuations on properties has been almost like a helicopter view over the city. There's about 950,000 properties that's been affected. And the method is open for flaws, and that's what we're really trying to point out here. Some of these properties have increased exorbitantly in their values up to about 70%. And that will apply to the next tariffs that's coming into play now in July. So what we've done is we believe that it's reasonable that all those people who have formally objected to the city, that they be given only the 2% rates increase and not necessarily the valuation increase, which will apply on top of that, so that they can get to a conclusion with the city before new rates are applied. I think it's fair.
I can imagine municipalities are saying, well, the reason why we need these increases is because we have sustainability issues, revenue not reaching the targets that it needs to.
Yeah, no, of course, the city is cash-strapped, but that is really a different problem. I think this has been coming for quite some time, and the city needs to rather look at how it can cut costs to save that additional amount of money, instead of applying exorbitant rates on ratepayers who cannot afford to pay it anymore. We quickly did the math today, and it becomes almost like about 1/5 of your monthly expense going to city rates and tariff charges, of your living cost or housing cost, rather, if you apply it to a bond. So it's getting too expensive almost to stay in the city of Johannesburg. I think there's a lot of areas where the city can still cut fat and ensure that they are reasonable in the process. At the end of the day, when they conclude these objections and the city was not fair about them, they'll have to pay these rates back to the ratepayers. So I think it's a reasonable and, let's say, a wiser approach to just freeze it and apply the 2% increases for now until they conclude those processes of objections.
Of course, the difficulty is that if they freeze those rates, sort of the same argument that goes with electricity. If you get an incorrect bill, you're still expected to settle that incorrect bill, and then you'll get a refund. That's the same logic not apply in this instance, that the city, of course, has made projections, financial projections, based on some of these figures, and therefore it might be easier for them to pay residents back than to not get the money in the first place.
I think it would be wiser to just freeze it for now, and that they don't have to go through that logistical nightmare and try to pull out money somewhere. It also opens the city up for fruitless litigation, which you don't want to get into. So if the city wants to show that it's true to its word in its recent budget discussions and expressions, where they want to serve the public better, they need to be fair and reasonable in the process. I don't think it's unreasonable to apply the 2% tariff increases, which is already an increase in revenue to the city, and wait till objections have been applied. And just on that point, out of the 950,000 properties that valuations have been conducted on, it's not the full amount that has lodged objections. I think a lot of those increases should be fair in value, and people haven't objected. So if they haven't followed process, they're not necessarily in a position to dispute the increases next month. But we know of 10,000s of people who have declared objections, and that needs to be resolved.
Julius, lastly, I think that one of the big issues, of course, is your observation around the fact that it's just becoming increasingly difficult to actually live in Johannesburg, and that could pose a bigger problem for the city in terms of retaining at least residents that are willing and able to pay for services.
The city is not in a position to sustainably run its course anyway. It's not like the ratepayers are increasing in the city of Johannesburg. In fact, they are decreasing. They're semigrating. There are towns that provide better services. They are cheaper to live in, and you can retain the asset value of your property. Currently, even in the valuations that we've disputed with the city, it's not. We don't believe that property values have increased in the city. In fact, they in some extent have decreased. So I think that's quite a big problem. Especially if you look at what they're budgeting for. They're budgeting for an additional 30 to 300,000 people moving towards the city for jobs. And this is mostly community members who cannot afford to pay for rates and services, which will again apply pressure on the city to provide free basic services. So it's just not sustainable, and I think they need to rethink the model and get back to basics. Not do these airy-fairy nice-to-do projects, but rather focus on providing proper services and maintaining the infrastructure so the economy can grow.
All right, Julius Kleynhans, we'll leave it there. He is with Outa.